guys, I am Elizabeth Marchand from Halls Elementary. I teach 3rd grade math, and today I'm going to go over geometry. This is that last unit that we didn't get to because of the COVID-19, and so I'm going to kind of go into it and go through the packet that you can access online. Our objective today is we are going to identify, describe, and classify shapes based on their attributes. So attributes is actually going to be one of our main words today that we're going to look at because we're going to look at a lot of shapes. So looking at our vocabulary, we're going to talk about polygons. So it's probably been a while since we've really talked in depth about shapes, and so polygons is any shape that is closed and has no curves. So any shape that has more than three or more lines, straight sides, and it is a two-dimensional shape and it is closed. And the reason that I keep saying that it is closed is when we're looking down here, these three are not polygons. Because if you can see right here, that shape is not closed. It just goes 1, 2, yes, there's 3 sides, but it is not a closed shape. So that is not a polygon. Over here, this crosses, so that does not make it a polygon. And then we've got a curved side, and we really only have 2 sides there. So looking at examples of polygons, we have a triangle with the 3 sides, straight, and it is closed, meaning those sides meet. Okay, we have a hexagon, a trapezoid, a rhombus, which I know some of you might identify this as a diamond, but we are going to talk about it as a rhombus in the math world, and then a square. I've got a couple different shapes that we're going to look at today. A square, and I have the attributes of each shape here. Attributes meaning how we would describe each of these shapes. So a square, think about how many sides. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. This has 4 square corners. A square corner is like that. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 square corners. All the sides are the same length in a square. So you've got this side, this top side, being the same as these 2 sides and the bottom. And 2 sets of parallel lines. I want to talk about what parallel means. Parallel lines are when you have this line and this line that go forever and ever and ever, and they will never come together. They will never meet. They can also go up and down. So when you're looking at this, you can have those 2 lines that are going to go back and forth. So you can go all the way to the sky and all the way underground, and they are never going to come together. If you had something like this line and this line, I want you to think about, are those going to go all the way to the sky and all the way down and never meet? Some of you might say, well, yeah, they're going to go down, and this one's going to continue. Oops. This one's going to continue all the way this way, and that one's going to go that way. They'll never meet, but then you have to think going the opposite way. Those are going to crash right there. So that does not work. So those are not parallel, but thinking about these lines are parallel. So this set is 1 set, and this would be 2 sets. Okay, so when you're looking at this right here, you see 2 sets of parallel lines, and I will show you where I see those. You're going that and that. That is 1 set. Think about like a pair of shoes. 1 set, and then the other set is shown going up and down. You've got 1, 2. So those 2 match going all the way up and down. So you have 2 sets of parallel lines. Okay, the next vocabulary word we're going to talk about is a quadrilateral. This is probably a bigger word that you have not seen before, but a quadrilateral is a shape with 4 sides. So if you're looking at this, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 in the trapezoid, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the square, 4 in the rhombus, 4 in this rhombus as well, just a little different, and then 4 in this rectangle. All of these can be named a quadrilateral. Parallelogram has 4 sides, just as these, 2 sets of sides that are the same length. So that's kind of like also a rectangle, but you see that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, but there's something different about a rectangle than a parallelogram, and that's the corners. So that is a square corner. When you're looking at the corners on these parallelograms, those are not square. So be careful when you're identifying that parallelogram and rectangle right there. But a parallelogram has to have 4 sides, 2 sets of sides that are the same length, and 2 sets of parallel lines. So you've got 1, 2, and then 1, 2. So that's 2 sets there. A rectangle, 4 sides as we talked about, 4 square corners, two sets of sides that are the same length. So I want you to think about this side, top, has to be the same length as the bottom. And this side on the left have to be the same as on the right. And then 2 sets of parallel lines. So these 2 that go side to side, and then the ones that go up and down. They will never touch. Our last vocabulary word we're going to discuss is a rhombus. So some of you might look at that and say, well, that's a square. Now, just be careful when we are looking at this. We are going to talk about the reason that there is something called a rhombus and something called a square and what attributes have to be for each one. A rhombus has 4 sides. All the sides are the same length and 2 sets of parallel lines. So here's one set, and then here's the other set. But let's look at the difference between this rhombus and square. Take a second to think, what do you see that's up here that they don't classify for a rhombus? Okay, so I hope that you notice that a square has to have 4 square corners, but a rhombus does not have to have 4 square corners. So a square can be a rhombus, but a rhombus cannot be a square. So I want you to think about that for a second, because that kind of can be confusing. A square can be a rhombus because it's not required to have 4 square corners, but it's okay to. But a rhombus cannot be a square because for a square you have to have 4 square corners. So if you need to pause the video and think about that, you're more than welcome to. So looking at this word quadrilaterals, that is a main part of our 3rd grade geometry. These are all quadrilaterals, and I want you to think back to when I was going over the vocabulary. How many sides does a quadrilateral have to have? Okay, the answer should be 4 sides. Now when you're looking at this is a rectangle, this is a trapezoid, this is a, you could say, parallelogram or rhombus. This is a rhombus, and this is a square. So all of these have different names, but they are quadrilaterals. So kind of how I envision it when I teach my class is like an umbrella. Now I'm sorry about this drawing, but here's the umbrella, and here's the word quadrilaterals is in the umbrella. Underneath the umbrella are like raindrops, kind of, and like the square is under it, the rhombus is under it, a rectangle is under it. So all of these shapes are under that umbrella of quadrilaterals. So that's like the big family name, and then there are specific shapes that go underneath it. So let's go ahead and look at, we're going to be getting into your packet pretty soon, and I want to look at describing these shapes with their attributes. So you've seen a lot of these shapes before, and some of them you've probably never seen, and you don't understand why they're even in this part. But we can describe a shape, any shape. It just may not be what we are used to as far as a square, rectangle, circle, but we can describe any shape that we want to. So this is kind of like our cheat sheet on the side, a triangle that has 3 sides and 3 angles. Now some of you might be saying, angles? What's that? Those are like corners. So this would be like 1 angle, 2 angles, 3 angles. Okay, here's 1 angle, 2 angles, 3 angles, 4, and 5. Okay, so just looking at those angles. Then a quadrilateral, which are all the ones we just talked about, have 4 sides and 4 angles. A pentagon has 5 sides and 5 angles. And a hexagon has 6 sides and 6 angles. So you can pause the video, and I want you to kind of decide what are the names of each of these. So let's just look at this one. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. Okay, and here's an angle as well. 4 sides and 4 angles. So when we're looking at this, it is classified as a quadrilateral. So A is, okay, let's look at B. I see 3 sides and 3 angles. So go ahead and answer. B is a triangle. So take a second to finish these up, C, D, E, F, G, and H, using kind of this little helper over here. Okay, let's go on to activity 1. So actually, let's go back real quick. I'll give you the answers to these, and then we'll go on to activity 1. I apologize. So C has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides and 4 angles, which makes it a quadrilateral. And some of you might have also said a trapezoid, because it has 1 set of parallel lines and those 4 angles. So either one works there. D has 5 sides and 5 angles, which makes it a pentagon. E is a quadrilateral or a rectangle. F is a triangle, G is a hexagon with the 6 sides and 6 angles, and H is a quadrilateral or a square. Now remember, a square can be a rhombus, but a rhombus cannot be a square. So this also could be a rhombus. Okay, so looking at activity 1, this is in your packet, and they have asked us to use clues and shapes to solve the problems. So we've got 3, there's 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to give you a minute to pause the video if you need to and work on this. So I'll read through it and then give you a second. I have, meaning the shape, and we're looking at these shapes over here. I have 4 sides. I am a parallelogram. So remember, a parallelogram has 2 sets of parallel sides. Now I'm going to go over here and just kind of cross out what doesn't have those attributes right there, just in that first line. So if we can go over here and say, I have 4 sides. Well, let's make sure. Okay, that's 4 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's not going to work for us here. 4 sides, 4 sides, 4 sides. Parallelogram, 2 sets of parallel lines. There's 2 sets there, 2 sets, 2 sets. Now look at this one. That guy's going to go forward and cross, so that doesn't work here for us. I have all square corners. Right away, A doesn't have square corners at all. You cannot make a square out of that. That's square corners and that's square corners. And then it says, I am not a square. If it's not a square, what is it, guys? It is D. And you should write in there a rectangle. Okay, now make sure you're using pencil on this because for me it's easy on a computer to erase, but you're going to want to erase or kind of start over. We have already chosen D, so we're going to kind of get rid of D for a second. Okay, so now that we have done D, I want you to go through and look at the next 2. I'm looking at those attributes and choosing from over here. So you probably won't choose D again, but make sure you're crossing out and you're going step by step for each attribute. All right, activity 2. This is one that is very similar, looking at those attributes again, those qualities of each, or characteristic of each shape. And we're going to look at the number of sides, angles, and then naming that shape. I'm just going to kind of do every other one with you so you can do some on your own as well. So let's start with B. B looks funky. That's not just a normal shape that we have seen before in 2nd grade. So it says number of sides. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. And how many angles? So because this is kind of smaller on my screen, I'm going to erase that, but you could probably do it in pencil with yours. So looking at these angles, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I also have 6 angles. And if you think about it back to our page before, which you can also go back and look here, that will help you. 6 sides and 6 angles gives us a hexagon. Okay, so then let's look at the next one. You should probably be able to get C as counting those sides and those angles, filling out this table. D doing the same thing, and E, don't forget to go back to A. Looking at activity 2 in your packet, draw and label And when it's saying label, make sure that you are saying how many sides and angles and you're showing that just like we have in the pictures, or you're writing it. Draw and label a pentagon and a hexagon. Make them different than the shapes shown above. So when they're saying above, they're just like these. So they've given you an example of your hexagon, and that should have been your pentagon. So you can kind of get creative how you want to show a pentagon and a hexagon, but make sure you are giving those that pentagon the attributes that it needs, the 5 sides and the 5 angles. And make sure you are giving a hexagon those 6 sides and 6 angles. Okay, looking at this one, use the shapes on the right to complete the problems below. So they've actually taken this rectangle and put it into 3 different shapes here. I'm going to trace over them, and so I want you to take 3 different crayons, or however you need to do. If you have crayons, great. If you don't, that's okay. And I'm just going to trace over each shape so I can see the difference here. Okay, so it says which shapes are triangles. Now I want you to remember what attributes give a triangle. 3 sides and 3 angles. So that would be F and H. Okay, and then what is the name of shape G? You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides, and let's look at the angles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 angles. So think back to what shape you would write right here. That would tell you how many angles. Then down here it says draw a shape that is not a polygon. So think back to the vocabulary slide when I was telling you what classified a polygon. And it says tell how you know. So you can write a sentence here and draw the shape that is not a polygon. Now remember, a polygon has to be closed shape, 3 or more sides, straight sides. Okay, so that's going to be huge, that you have to have 3 or more sides and it has to be closed. Okay, we're looking into activity 3. Complete the Venn diagram by drawing shapes to show which group or groups it belongs to. You're going to draw each of these shapes in this Venn diagram. Now remember, this is going to be for one attribute, this is for another, and then this is when it's the same. So you're going to use these shapes right here, and you're going to draw them in your circles. And it says this one is 3 sides but no square corners. So going to look up here, this has 3 sides and this has 3 sides, but this looks like a square corner. So I need this guy right here, and I'm going to draw him down here. Then let's look over here. This says some square corners, but not 3 sides. So that's 4 sides, so that's not 3 sides, and that's some square corners. It didn't tell me how many square corners, it just said some of them. So there's my rectangle. So then I'm going to leave you to finish up with those two, kind of figuring out, do those qualify 3 sides and some square corners, or do they qualify as some square corners but not 3 sides? Okay, looking at the last part of activity 3, write the name of 2 different groups that each shape below belongs to. Now again, you can go back to the beginning of this or go to the packet if you don't remember. But I want you to think about the sides and the angles. And then here, same thing, sides and angles. 2 different groups. So what are 2 different names that you could call these 2 shapes? Now don't forget about my umbrella when I talked about the quadrilaterals and that top umbrella and then all those 4 sided shapes below it. So I'm going to leave you with these shapes right here. And I kind of want you to think and challenge yourself to give each of these shapes at least one name, and some of them might go by two names. So again, that goes with the umbrella of what are these shapes that you would just know, and then what other group does it fall underneath?